Welcome to The Window on talkSPORT, brought to you by Intuit Quickbooks. Save time and unlock growth with integrated business tools and AI automation, all in one place. Crookie, let's kick it off then. Mateta, Jean-Philippe, what are the updates?
Well, the latest we have is that Nottingham Forest are now the most advanced in terms of trying to sign Jean-Philippe Mateta from Crystal Palace. It's the worst kept secret in football that he wants to leave the FA Cup holders. I'm told actually his behaviour behind the scenes is not endearing himself, I don't think, to Oliver Glasner and his teammates. Toys firmly out of the pram. Obviously, he feels like the club have not shown enough ambition since winning the FA Cup at Wembley, hence the fact he wants to move. I think he also sees a decent payday in the offing. He's asking for wages, I'm told, of around 150 grand a week. Forest willing to pay £35 million for the Frenchman. We know that Palace's valuation is a little bit higher than that, around the £40 million mark, and I think it would be dependent on Palace getting a replacement in. Maybe Jurgen Strand-Larsen. We've mentioned him a couple of times, given his relationship with the Palace sporting director, Matt Hobbs, who brought him into English football when he had the same position at Wolves. I do also wonder, when it comes to Mateta, we know there has been historic interest from Italy with Juventus and AC Milan. Do Tottenham make a play potentially between now and the window closing? Because there are strong whispers that they're willing to terminate Randall Kolo Muani's loan. He's wanted by Juventus. Obviously, they would need a replacement to make that come to fruition. And Mateta is someone who has been on their list in the past. So I think that's certainly one to keep an eye on.
It was Jeff Stelling and Ali McCoyce on talkSPORT Breakfast this morning, and they said the Mateta deal to Forest makes absolutely no sense.
The boy who plays up front, Igor Jesus, does a good job for them now. Doesn't score enough goals, but he scored at the weekend. And they've also got Chris Wood, got Ty. Somebody's got to go.
Tell you who does need them.
Palace.
Aye.
Yeah.
Crystal Palace need them.
Well, that's the thing. It would then leave Eddie Nketiah as the only striker.
Can't happen. I just don't, unless they've got a ready-made replacement, I don't think it can happen.
But the argument would be...
They're not out it.
He's made it clear he wants to go.
Yeah.
So do you keep somebody who wants to go?
Yeah.
But he's also made it clear, by the way, he wants Champions League football. Well, he's not getting that with Forest.
No.
That's very true.
No
That is
chance.
very true.
None whatsoever. If it's in the best interest of the club, he can't go. If you sit him down and talk to him and say, look, you can go in the summer, we need to, because I've just had a quick look at the league again. You know, they could get sucked into it easily. They could get
Palace.
sucked into it.
Oh, I think they're in it.
Huh?
I do think they're in it. But I think Palace have probably made it clear that they will sell, you know, providing they can find, providing the money's right and there's a replacement.
God, you're going through it a bit if you're a Crystal Palace fan, aren't you? I mean, like, what, 9 months ago, just not even that, you're FA Cup champions, you're then in Europe. Do you think Oliver Glasner's job might be in threat?
Well, I think it should be in terms of recent results. What was it? No wins in 11 now for Oliver Glasner. Dumped out the FA Cup by non-league Macclesfield. A really humiliating afternoon. First time the holders have gone out to a non-league team in more than 100 years. So if I was Steve Parish, I would be asking serious questions. And obviously by going public with the fact he was leaving at the end of the season, seemingly he went public in that press conference without telling his paymasters that was his plan. I do think that uncertainty will seep into the dressing room, and even subconsciously, if that's caused the Palace players to just slacken off by 5 or 10%, that could be the difference between winning and losing Premier League games. They're only 8 points above the relegation places, so I do think Palace have cause for concern.
And especially with Nottingham Forest as well, who aren't in the most healthy of positions in the Premier League, and if you compare it to last season. And if they're going to bring in someone like Mateta, it sort of, was it a couple of years ago? It reminds me of when Newcastle were in trouble and they signed Chris Wood from Burnley, and Burnley went down and then Newcastle found an unbelievable run of form with Chris Wood. We could see that script sort of coming back up again in this second half of the season.
Yeah, and that's why I think it makes it difficult actually for Palace to do this deal with a team they now have to see as a potential relegation rival. And actually I know from being quite close to that Chris Wood deal, part of the attraction for Newcastle not only was the fact he might be able to score some goals for them, but it was to weaken a relegation rival, and certainly it had that impact. So I think if Mateta is to go, and as I say, it is dependent on Palace themselves getting a replacement, I think they'd rather not sell to Nottingham Forest. And also there's the acrimony between the two clubs, the animosity that dates back to the start of the season when Forest nicked Palace's place in the Europa League.
Have you got an update for us on Andy Robertson's future at Anfield?
At the moment, he stays, but I say at the moment because I think this is one that could develop between now and the window closing at 7 o'clock on Monday. There was a deal in place with Spurs. We were the first to report the fee of around £5 million, inclusive of add-ons. At that stage, Liverpool were trying to get Tsimikas back from his loan spell at Roma. Roma have blocked that, which is why at the moment Robertson stays. However, we know that Roma have had a bid rejected in the last few days for Müller-Wolf, a left-back at Wolverhampton Wanderers, €8 million. So that tells us they are looking for a replacement for Tsimikas. If they get one, then maybe the dominoes start to fall into place. Tsimikas goes back to Liverpool and Robertson gets that move to Spurs. I think what we can be assured of is that Robertson is not going to actively try and force his way out. He's got too much respect for Liverpool. He's too respected by his teammates, by the hierarchy and by the fans themselves. So he'll want to go out on good terms, Andy Robertson.
It's seeming like, obviously, I'm not throwing a curveball at you, but everything that I see that's happening in Europe at the moment, Roma are on an absolute mad one. Like, what do you know why that is, Crook? Has there been new investment?
Well, the Freaking Group have always been ambitious, and I think they see that Roma are in a decent position in the league, and you know that they want to back their manager. So I'm not overly surprised by that. They are still one of the biggest clubs in Italy. On the subject of Roma, by the way, Evan Ferguson, obviously on loan there, he's another player that's been mentioned to me as being on Nottingham Forest list if they couldn't get Mateta. And that would make a lot of sense, wouldn't it? A player who is proven in the Premier League, albeit didn't score a lot of goals towards the end of his time at Brighton. He is still a Brighton player, so they would have to agree to terminate the loan and get him to Forest. But he's not pulled up any trees in Italy, so I'm not sure that Roma particularly would put up too many roadblocks to that move happening.
I'll take him at Fulham as well. I know we were linked to him a couple of weeks ago, but I think it'd be the perfect place for him, especially with an aging Raul Jimenez. And then you said last week to me that Rodrigo Muniz wouldn't put up a lot of goals, and I disagree. But listen, it's not about Fulham until later on in the questions that I got. At Spurs, in the search for a new goalkeeper, Vicario. I mean, the first couple of seasons that he's had in the Premier League, he looked like he was going to be a bit of a world beater. I put him in some of my team of the seasons because he was a great shot stopper and acrobatically as well. He was top of the range. Robin Roof at Sunderland, who's had a great debut season in the Premier League, could he be on his way to North London?
Well, he's had a brilliant season, hasn't he? 7 clean sheets. I think in the notebook on the talkSPORT website where I wrote this story, I reported that Bravka at Burnley has made more saves than Robin Roofs, and that they only paid about 11 million quid for him, Sunderland. So he has been one of the success stories of the season. You're right about Vicario. I think Tottenham just feel that he's made too many errors to see him as their long-term number one. There's interest from Inter Milan. I think he would be open to going back to Italy. So yeah, not for this window, I don't think, but certainly come the summer, Robin Roofs and Tottenham could be one that starts to gather momentum. I think Sunderland will want a lot more than they paid for him. He's got a long-term contract there, but I can see the attraction when it comes to Tottenham and Robin Roofs.
God, Tottenham really are going through it at the moment as well. But how would that impact a club like Sunderland as well, who have been, had a strong start to the season back in the Premier League after all this time?
Well, this is the issue for Sunderland because they've done so well. They've exceeded all expectations already, really. They're not going to be dragged into relegation trouble. Their players are going to be attracting interest from other clubs. Siddiqui has been mentioned to me as a potential Manchester United target. I wonder even about Granit Xhaka. He's come back into the Premier League. He's been, for me, one of the signings of the season, and it's so important to Sunderland. We saw how they struggled without him against West Ham at the weekend. Do a club higher up the food chain, take a look at him. Newcastle, for example, if Sandro Tonali were to leave, or they had to sell Bruno Guimaraes, could Granit Xhaka be a potential replacement there? That would be controversial, wouldn't it, taking a player from Sunderland? But you get my point.
Crookie, over to Manchester United then. Reports this morning that Bruno Fernandes could be leaving potentially in the summer. It's all still a bit up in the air, his future at the club.
Yeah, I think if you were asking me to give you a percentage, I think probably 60-40 that Bruno Fernandes was to leave at the end of the season. We know he's got this release clause of less than £60 million that top clubs in Europe can activate. I think he might feel that maybe he's ready for a new challenge, that he's taken Manchester United as far as he can. It may be dependent on who comes in as manager, and I think that's why it's important they make a decision probably in advance at the end of the season so they can give their captain some assurances. As a Manchester United fan, I'd be really sad to see Bruno Fernandes go, because again, I think you saw at Arsenal at the weekend, his range of passing, the role he played in certainly the third goal, the second goal for Patrick Dorgu, the way he played the ball into him. He sees things that nobody else can. And I think he's underappreciated, certainly by non-Manchester United fans. I think he has been a real driving force on the pitch. His numbers in terms of goals and assists are off the scale. I know he's not in the first flush of youth, but he never gets injured. He's Ronaldo-esque in that department, with the ability to stay fit and play minute after minute, game after game, week in, week out. So I'd like him to stay, but at the same time, I don't think anybody would begrudge him leaving, because he's been the best signing that United have made since Sir Alex Ferguson left the club, and he probably hasn't got the silverware to back up his talent.
That's the thing as well. You mentioned about silverware, and I'll mention the stats as well, because I think I looked at it back end of last week, and I don't think he's dropped below like 13 goals in all competitions since he's been at the club. Someone's probably going to say that's wrong, but for my sort of like little view on it, his goal return is actually really good for a central midfielder, and central attacking midfielder is what he is. And you mentioned about silverware there. I know during dark times of Manchester United over the last couple of years, he's been one of sort of like the bright lights. I had the same issue with Heung-min Son. I really thought that Son was a world beater, and Son should have won Premier League titles, and he should have probably won Champions League titles as well. But someone like Bruno, who's at the age of like 31 at the moment, that time's potentially gone. And I always saw a club like Paris Saint-Germain being like a good destination for him. But that's probably gone now, where it's probably going to be, like he's always been rumoured to be, going to the Saudi Pro League.
I don't know.
You feel like he's got more to give in Europe?
Yeah, I think if he goes anywhere, it'll be Europe. You know, he's had opportunities to go to Saudi Arabia before. He was very close, I think, at the start of the season to making that move. Obviously, one of his grievances is that the hierarchy, in his eyes, didn't do enough to persuade him that he should stay. It was his wife, I think, actually, who pulled the plug on that move. And yeah, again, as much as I said I wouldn't begrudge him leaving as a United fan, I'd be disappointed if he went to Saudi Arabia. I think he has got more to offer. Imagine him spraying balls up to Harry Kane at Bayern Munich, for example.
Oh, mate, it'd be insane. And yeah, I mean, I'm contradicting myself. Of course, he can give more in Europe, but it's whether clubs are wanting to take a punt on him at the same time as well. Injury record is fantastic. It's clean. Trent Alexander-Arnold, there was rumours over the last sort of 48, 72 hours that he could be leaving Real Madrid for Manchester City. It hasn't really been the fairy tale move that he was expecting. All of those Spanish lessons might have worked out if he's going into Madrid City Centre and getting himself a coffee. But listen, Crookie, how mental would this be if he is to swap Madrid for Manchester, and Liverpool, one of Liverpool's biggest rivals of the last couple of years as well?
Yeah, it certainly wouldn't do much to patch up that relationship between him and the Liverpool supporters. I did speak to people at Manchester City when this story came out, and it was played down to me. That's not saying it definitely won't happen, because actually I think he'd be a great signing for Manchester City. Bearing in mind they've been playing midfielders at fullback, is he an improvement on Mateus Nunes? Absolutely. But it would be a controversial move to make, particularly after the flack that he got by going to the Bernabeu. And as much as it's been a tough season for him so far, I think Trent will feel that he's got the talent to turn those doubters around, to get the Real Madrid fans back on side, and to still be a success over in Spain. I think having risked his legacy at Liverpool to such an extent that he was being booed on by Liverpool fans, I think just to go and chuck in the towel at Real Madrid because your first season hasn't gone particularly well would probably be a little bit of a mistake if you're Trent Alexander-Arnold. But the fact he isn't playing very well at Real Madrid has probably cost him a place in the England World Cup squad, hasn't it?
Gosh, it's just a curse, isn't there, at Real Madrid? I mean, people look back on Beckham's time in the Galacticos at Real Madrid and don't really class that as a success. It's meant when you think that Steve McManaman might be the only successful Englishman that's played for Real Madrid. It just seems like a bit of a curse and a poison chalice. But listen, if Trent wants to carry on winning, if Manchester City could win the Premier League title this year, and I hope they do. I didn't see another better option, to be honest, with how Pep Guardiola's improving that team. And I know obviously they're not really performing to the best of their abilities with the money that's been spent. But what a better place to go, because you're not going to get a Liverpool return at this point in time, are you?
No, I mean, can you imagine the atmosphere though when Liverpool play Manchester City at Anfield and Trent comes on? That would be off the scale.
Oh, mate, well, listen, we'll probably try and cover it on talkSPORT and do absolutely everything that we can. Right, Douglas Luiz, a name that sort of like dominated both transfer windows, that being the summer and also the winter, moved to Nottingham Forest. But is there a potential return to Aston Villa?
Yeah, this was one I got wind of on Monday night, that Aston Villa were seriously contemplating the prospect of re-signing Douglas Luiz. We know that Chelsea have had conversations as well. He's on loan at Nottingham Forest from Juventus, but he's certainly not playing week in, week out in the Premier League. And now we know that Yuri Tillemans is likely to miss a few weeks with injury, so you can understand why perhaps Villa are ramping up their interest. And they just need some bodies, don't they, Villa? Because they're in a brilliant position. They're only 4 points off the title, and while I don't think they're serious contenders, the league table suggests otherwise. Certainly they're right there in the race for the top four. Tammy Abraham is coming back, which looks a good, astute signing in terms of taking a bit of the pressure off Ollie Watkins. If they can bring Douglas Luiz back, someone who knows the club, someone who the Villa fans I think still respect from his previous time there, I think that could be a good move in this window.
I can remember speaking to people in the summer, and they were Manchester United fans, and they said they would absolutely love Douglas Luiz to go to Old Trafford, someone that knows the Premier League. Why is it not worked out for him at Nottingham Forest? Is it the competition for places and he's going up someone like potentially like a Elliot Anderson who's just been sublime?
Yeah, and I think Sangare's played well in recent weeks as well, which has further limited his opportunities. But actually, if you go back to the signings that Forest made in the summer, and it's worth pointing out that Edu was overseeing most of those signings, a lot of them haven't been great, have they? James McAtee has struggled. Douglas Luiz, who you've mentioned, they had the boy up front who they've sent to Frankfurt on loan. So, while they were trying to strengthen from a position of power, having just qualified for Europe for the first time in 3 decades, it was quite a poor window for Nottingham Forest.
You mentioned about the top four and Aston Villa being close to the title. I'd just like to remind you, Crookie, and everyone that's listening, obviously I have a lot of bias when it comes to this football club. Fulham, 4 points off the top four. Harry Wilson is in the form of his life, but we're going to have to stick with Nottingham Forest as well, because in your transfer notebook, Nottingham Forest are interested yet again in the Fulham manager. The Khans need to put any contract in front of him because he is the best manager in recent history at Fulham. And this is an incredible feat that we're witnessing right now. Sign the contract for Harry Wilson and also Marco Silva. Please, Crookie, tell me these Nottingham Forest rumours are not true, because they keep coming up.
Well, let's give you a bit of good news first and foremost. It does look like Fulham are edging closer for a deal with the PSV striker Ricardo Pepi. So we're expecting that one potentially to get done. We know that they're in advanced talks with Manchester City for Oscar Bob. As of yesterday, they've not made a formal bid, but it was incoming, and I think that deal for around 35 million could get done as well. Adama Traore, as I understand it, as we're recording, is at the West Ham training ground to complete his link up with Nuno Espirito Santo. So they are active in the market. I spoke to Marco Silva after the game against Brighton when you staged that smash and grab win. Harry Wilson, as you say, yet another goal with a late free kick. He was imploring Harry Wilson to sign a new contract, and I turned it around a bit on Marco Silva and said, well, hold on a minute, mate. You haven't signed a new contract either. You're talking about Harry Wilson committing his future. Are you any closer to committing yours? And he said no. He knows the club want to keep him. They want to continue their journey, but that's something that's going to be decided in the next few weeks and months. And this interest from Nottingham Forest has never really gone away. I think if they could have got him out of Fulham when they hired Sean Dyche, then Marco Silva would have been the preferred candidate. Forest have struggled. It was 1 win in 8, I think, before they beat Brentford at the weekend. And I was starting to get murmurings going into that game that maybe, again, Marinakis was hovering over the trigger. I don't expect him to part company with Sean Dyche this season, but even if he keeps them up, I don't think it's guaranteed that he stays. He's only under contract until the summer of 2027, so it wouldn't be a particularly expensive manoeuvre to get rid of him. And Marco Silva as a free agent, I think, would be very high on Marinakis' list of potential replacements.
I know Nottingham Forest, a big football club, they've got the history, but in this current climate, Crookie, it's a sideways move. It is. Like, Marco Silva has the potential to be the manager of a top 4, top 6 club. We've spoken about him potentially being the man that goes in the dugout if Thomas Frank were to be sacked by Tottenham. And I know what you're saying, people. Tottenham finished, 16th, 17th last season and are about 13th or 14th this season. But Tottenham are a big six club, traditionally. But in my opinion, I'd love to know your thoughts on that. It seems a bit sideways.
What, Marco Silva going to Forest or to Spurs?
I know it's pedigree, they're a bigger club.
And I think also Marinakis is an owner who is going to invest. You know, he is ambitious. He doesn't want this to be a one-season hit in terms of Europe. Obviously, to get back there, they're probably going to have to win the Europa League. And I did their game against Braga for talkSPORT 2 last week. They weren't particularly impressive, but he made a lot of changes. Sean Dyche, and again, it probably exposed the poor window they had last summer. But I guess if you're Marco Silva, this is probably the longest he's ever stayed at any one club. Usually 2 years is pretty much his lifespan. He might just feel that with Fulham, obviously one of the more frugal teams in the league, shall we say, politely, that he's taken them as far as he can. Having said that, if he could get them into Europe this season, then he might just think, well, do you know what? Maybe I owe it to the fans and the club to lead them into that competition.
Frugal. You've been spending too much time with Simon Jordan, Crook. You're an absolute disgrace. People like me and you don't use big words like that. Listen, we're on the charge for Europe, and if we get Europe, it'll be unbelievable. Right, I know you've got to go in a minute, but just to finish up, Axel Disasi and Raheem Sterling, are they still being cast out at Chelsea? Is there no way back? Are they going to be able to get moves this winter, yes or no?
Well, Disasi is no longer part of the bomb squad. He's been training with the first team. Sterling very much is not training with the first team, but I think Disasi probably the more likely to get a move. West Ham and Crystal Palace both showing a bit of interest in him, so I think we could well see that develop over the next few days before the window closes on Monday. But no sign of any imminent move for Raheem Sterling. West Ham wanted him on loan. He only wanted a permanent move. Fulham were interested, but it looks like Oscar Bob is their preferred target in that position now. So I think on 300 grand a week, Raheem Sterling looks like he's going to see out the season at Chelsea without kicking a ball, and then we'll see what happens at the end of the season. He had an opportunity to go to Bayern Munich in the final hours of the summer transfer window, but I think it just came too late for him from a personal perspective to make that happen, and ideally he wants to stay in London.
Joshua Zirkzee, could his time be up at Manchester United?
I don't think so, because we're hearing today that Patrick Dorgu is going to be out for a few weeks. The squad is light already. They're not planning, I don't think, on bringing anybody in between now and Monday, so I think Zirkzee will have to stay at least until the summer, and then he'll probably be allowed to go. But yeah, I think it would be foolhardy to weaken Michael Carrick's options, particularly when they're in such a good position now to qualify for the Champions League.
And final one, Crookie, before we let you go. Federico Chiesa, we're seeing reports this morning that he could return to Juventus. Any truth in that?
Again, I think Liverpool would be reluctant because the squad looked light at the weekend. They had a lot of kids on the bench as they lost to Bournemouth. I think Chiesa has proved himself to be a very useful impact sub. So I think if he goes anywhere, it would likely happen in the summer. Never say never in the final week of a transfer window, but I'd be surprised if that happened now.
Crookie, thank you so much for your time, mate. I mean, 2nd of February, the transfer window will be slammed shut for the winter, and we have to wait again until the summer. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember, if you're new here, to subscribe to the channel just down below. Leave us a comment, leave us a like, and check out Alex Crook on Twitter as well for all of the latest transfer news happening in the Premier League and around the world. Goodbye. You've been watching The Window on talkSPORT, brought to you by Intuit Quickbooks. Save time and unlock growth with integrated business tools and AI automation, all in one place.